Hi, I'm Lisa DeMonte from mylegal.com, and it's Tuesday, March 23rd, and we're here for the final day of the conference at the Georgetown University Law Center, Law Firm Evolution, Brave New World, or Business as Usual. I'm honored to have as my guest Patricia Gillette, Pat, who's a partner at Orrick Harrington's San Francisco office and is also the founder of the Opt-in Project. Pat, welcome, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. You just were part of a panel discussion about managing the law firm labor force. It was a very interesting conversation that we had. And one of the comments that you made, Pat, really intrigued me. You said, change is like heaven. Everyone wants to go there, but nobody wants to die. Can you expound upon that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Lawyers are probably one of the most risk-adverse groups of professionals around. So we're very quick to take risk on the part of our clients, and that's what we're paid to do. But when it comes to assessing our own organizations, we're extremely risk-adverse. We know we have to change, but we don't want to change outside of a small little group of changes that we find acceptable. So I think what we see in the law firm profession right now is an emphasis on change, but an inability to know how to implement that. So we talk a lot about it, but we see very little implementation.
So what are law firms doing to embrace those changes and to implement them, if that's the biggest challenge that they face in that regard?
Well, probably the biggest challenge that we've had in the past few years has been the economic downturn. And so the solution of a lot of law firms, rather than doing what I would think would be better from an organizational development and also from an employee workforce standpoint, which is to look at your business and see if there's a way to change the way you get work done, the way your work is structured, the way you compensate your people. Instead of doing that, law firms took what I consider to be the easy out, which was to lay employees off. Now, for some law firms, that was really required, but it wasn't required for all law firms. So 95% of the law firms in the United States laid people off. I would have liked to have seen them, and that's because that's the easy change to make. Mm-hmm. It's quick, it's done, and your bottom line rises. But it doesn't solve the systemic problem, which is, in my opinion, the work structure of law firms, which I think needs to change.
And during your presentation, you talked about a number of alternatives that law firms could utilize instead of layoffs. Can you share with the folks that are going to be watching the video what some of those alternatives might be?
Yeah, so I think there are a number of ways that law firms can reduce their costs and improve their efficiency without laying people off. But they require major changes in the way we think about law firm business. So, for example, instead of hiring a ton of associates as first years and paying them $160,000 as we do in San Francisco and in New York, we ought to think about hiring fewer associates, really picking them carefully, hiring fewer, and I think that they ought to spend the first 2 years learning how to be a lawyer. If the law schools aren't going to train them how to be lawyers, which I don't think they're doing a very good job of, then we need to train them how to be lawyers. So I would reduce their salaries significantly. I would reduce their billable hours and maybe eliminate them completely, and encourage them to actually learn how to be a lawyer by shadowing other lawyers in the firm, by attending training programs, by learning the practice of law, which they don't learn in law school. They learn a lot of theories, they learn a lot of ways to think, which is important, but they don't learn how to be a lawyer. Other changes you could do is get rid of the billable hour, stop incenting people to bill based on the number of hours in a day versus bill based on quality, which I think would bring clients back into the fold of being willing to stay with law firms that they've been with traditionally rather than deciding to leave them because the rates just keep going up. I'd like to see law firms think about measuring performance based on competency and merit rather than you're out of law school. It really makes no sense to measure performance by you're out of law school. And probably one of the most important things, or two really important things I think I'd like to mention as well. One is we need to change the expectation of lawyers regarding compensation, both lawyers coming into our firms and partners. And what I feel happens is that people come in right now earning these big salaries, and so they come in with an expectation that value is not attached to compensation. And they go through the firm, and that's the way they expect their future to be, that just because they have put in time that they're entitled to more money. So I think we have to change that expectation. I think we have to change the expectation of partners that we are entitled to make a certain amount of money. The profits per partner mantra that has come to dominate the discussion of particularly big law because of the various lists that are out, because of the fear of competition, has really worked to the detriment of lawyers and clients.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that law firms really need to be doing a self-analysis and looking at their law firm practice as a business and running their law firm like a business, making the lawyers, the associates, the partners accountable for their behavior and accountable for the results, and therefore that perhaps in the short term is going to cause a little bit of a reduction in what they might ordinarily expect to be paid, but in the long run might benefit the firm and the lawyers by the retention of the clients.
Exactly. I think that if law firms invest in their companies the way corporations have, if they take the time to really understand their business, and if they do something which would be like death to many lawyers, and that is hire people who are what we call non-lawyers. I mean, think about it, we actually call people non-lawyers. But if we were to hire people who actually understand the business, I think it would make a huge difference in the profitability of law firms. I happen to work at a law firm where we've done that, and we've been extremely successful because we have a chair who's a visionary and who really does look to the way a business should be run rather than the myopic view that a lot of chairs of law firms have, which is we're a law firm and we're different. We're really not different, we're a business.
When you talk about the training of the young associates as they come into the firm, that's an expensive undertaking, obviously. So do you think that along with that, as things evolve and change, that the law firms will perhaps need for those young associates to agree to stay with the firm for a certain number of years so that the law firm can in fact have a return on their investment? Is that possible? Is
Yes.
that likely?
Yes, and I actually think a lot of other organizations have actually experimented with that. So accounting firms, for example, will allow you to go to business school if you agree, and they'll pay for it if you agree to come back for a certain period of time. We don't have that luxury because people have to go to law school first, but I think that there could be some kind of a relationship between we're investing in you and we need you to invest in us. I think this generation, Gen Y, is hungry for that kind of connection and that kind of emphasis on loyalty and culture.
And so, again, drawing from another business vertical to bring those practices within the law firm structure.
Right. I think it's just critical that law firms start looking to other organizations. We are not unique. We are not that different. We always think of ourselves as such, but I really think that we have a lot to learn from other corporations and other businesses.
Pat, one last question. We're just a couple of minutes shy of running out of time. Why do you feel there's been a decline in diversity in the face of the economic downturn? I know you mentioned that during the seminar a little bit earlier this morning. Why do you think that's happening?
Well, I think it started before the economic downturn. So we saw an exodus of women in particular from law firms before the economic downturn. And that really, in my opinion, was not reflective of a lack of part-time policies or a lack of maternity policy, as the men always want to characterize it. It was really a reflection of the structure of law firms that was a ladder. You had to go straight up or you were out. And what Deloitte has embraced, and the phrase I love, is that they have a lattice rather than a ladder, so that people can move through their careers at a pace that makes sense. So I think before the economic downturn, you saw women leaving law firms because of that. There was only one way up, and it just was not, it didn't fit into many women's lifestyles. What we're seeing now is that women are being among the first to be laid off, and a lot of part-time people are being laid off as well, and those tend to be women. So, and then you have the cultural issue. Women want to feel a connection. They want to feel a relationship to their businesses. That actually is a plus. But when firms start doing layoffs, it forever affects the culture, and it changes that culture. And so I think a lot of women have said, I'll leave.
Pat, thank you so much for joining us today and taking the time to chat with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. All right.